woman gets ready and goes to a party. While this could be the beginning of many stories, too often it is tragically the beginning of a terribly familiar one, the story of rape. The day after, police respond with questioning. They ask, "What were you wearing? What did you drink? Why did you go to that party? Why did you do everything you did?" Our society tends to agree that rape is a horrific crime that must be dealt with and stopped. Yet how do we do so? And is what we are currently doing working? Our society typically views victims' actions as contributing to the assault. Accordingly, prevention techniques have become popular ways for victims to prevent rape because they aim to alter their own actions. Yet, are prevention techniques really as effective as they are perceived to be? Or do they have flaws that can hurt instead of help the victim? Rape prevention techniques are strategies used to protect potential victims from and stop the perpetration of rape by another person. They aim to do this through adjusting certain behaviors that are believed to be connected to the occurrence of the act. Typical examples of prevention techniques, according to researcher Samantha Allen, which are promoted by the media, sexual violence organizations, and college campuses, include to not binge drink, to avoid provocative clothing, to avoid secluded areas, to use self-defense, and more. Rape prevention techniques are often ineffective, and in their misuse, yield harmful effects. Prevention techniques for rape tend to be directed towards women, yet they fail to address or change the behavior of the perpetrators. This wrongly puts the ultimate responsibility for assaults on women and to alter their own actions to stop the rape. Prevention techniques also create a set of standards or a stereotype for an unrealistic, perfect victim of rape that does not represent a majority of victims. Further, this hinders victims from receiving justice in the court system. And in turn, since perpetrators are not convicted, they are able to reperpetrate. First of all, prevention techniques are harmful because they create and rely on false ideas. Prevention techniques are directed towards women and their actions, which implies that their actions are responsible for the rape, and therefore they need to alter their own actions to stop the rape. In fact, according to researchers, out of 15 college campuses and 500 prevention techniques analyzed, 80% were directed towards women's behavior, while only 14% were directed towards men's behavior, and only 6% were gender neutral. They encourage women's actions to change as if they are the primary cause of the crime. Yet instead, it is more logical and vital to challenge perpetrators' actions because their actions will be the crime itself. And they should use their God-given self-control to not take advantage, despite any circumstance, of the victim. Prevention techniques also create a standard for a legitimate rape, and therefore a perfect victim of rape, through establishing how victims should act before, during, and after the assault. These widely accepted, generally false beliefs are seen in the court system, for they're used by juries and judges to make their final verdicts in prosecutions. This perfect victim has taken every precaution and applied every prevention technique possible, and yet was still raped despite her best efforts. Yet, this standard is false because it does not represent a majority of rapes that occur. First of all, prevention techniques advocate to be on alert around strangers, which implies that rape occurs through a stranger jumping out of a dark alley scenario. Yet, statistics present the opposite. In a World Health Organization 10-country study, a minimum of 15% of women experience physical or sexual abuse by a husband or partner. And in the 2010 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, out of female victims tested, only 13.8% were raped by strangers. Yet, 51.1% were raped by current or former partners, 40.8% were raped by acquaintances, and 12.5% were raped by family members. While out of male victims tested, only 15.1% were raped by strangers, yet 52.4% were raped by acquaintances. Another expectation developed from prevention techniques is that victims will be physically, visibly battered, which is a supposed sign of the victim's resistance or use of self-defense during the crime. Yet instead, as I proved earlier, since acquaintance rape is more common, perpetrators do not typically use physical force against their victims. Instead, in acquaintance rape, coercion, which includes intimidation, pressure, verbal threats, and manipulation, are used. In fact, 1 in 20 women and men are victims of the use of coercion. Coercion can be a psychological roadblock for victims trying to use self-defense. For victims may not believe it is necessary or fair to use self-defense against a perpetrator who is not using physical force against them. Or they may be hesitant to use self-defense that could potentially hurt their acquaintance perpetrators. So physical harm cannot characterize a majority of rapes that occur because most victims are not rendered battered by their perpetrators. These new false ideas yield harmful effects in the legal system. In fact, as a result of these legitimate victim expectations, 2/3 of legally defined rape victims do not identify themselves as rape victims because they're fearful that once they do, they will be discredited and blamed because they do not correspond exactly with these rigid expectations. As a result of this, a majority of rapes go unreported. For only 34% or 36% of rapes, 34% of attempted rapes, and 26% of other sexual assaults are reported to police, according to a national crime victimization survey. And even out of those that are reported, many remain unfounded or are not able to be identified as sexual assault because police refuse to investigate the crime further in the first place because the victims do not correspond with their legitimate victim expectations. These false ideas also affect jurors' judgment, who are the deciding votes of the cases, and hinders them from convicting offenders. According to researchers, out of 500 judges' information about their recent jury trials, judges report that they would have convicted the perpetrator 83% of the time, while the jury only convicted 64%. This in sexual assault trials tends to be because juries are not well informed about rape or rape victims. In fact, when researchers tested experts and juries' answers on a sexual assault questionnaire about PTSD and qualities and experiences of rape, they compared their answers and saw that they were not compatible. And after analyzation, researchers concluded that the juries were not well informed about rape. This tends to be because juries adhere to a primary rape myth, that rape is only when a rapist is a stranger who uses force or a weapon against a victim who is not engaged in any suspect behaviors, has suffered serious physical injuries as a result of the attack, and promptly complained to police. Since offenders are not convicted, they are able to commit the same offense. According to researchers, out of 120 rapists tested, they were responsible for 1,225 separate acts of interpersonal violence, including rape, battery, and child sexual and physical abuse. And they averaged to 5.8 rapes each. Overall, when the criminal justice system adheres to rape myths, this leads them to disbelieve victims, who then do not report, and so rapists are not caught, arrested, and prosecuted, and so they are likely to reoffend. Some may argue that prevention techniques do work because rape has decreased over a recent period of years. For according to David A. Farenthold, a Washington Post reporter, rapes per capita in the US have dropped more than 85% since the 1970s. Yet, this statistic does not accurately reflect reality. For this was reported on in 2006, when the definition of rape was when a man engages in sexual intercourse with a woman, not his wife, by threat or force. This definition only included heterosexual intercourse, assigned gender to the victim and perpetrator, excluded possibilities of intermarital rape, and other types of rape through coercion or with other sexual contact. Therefore, a majority of rapes that actually happened were neglected to be included. And many criminologists say that this report is a mirage because rates are still very underreported. In fact, the Justice Department said that 61% of sexual assaults are not reported because victims fear harassment and discreditation. Overall, while prevention techniques honorably intend to protect potential victims from becoming actual victims, in reality, they fall far short. They seek to change victims, yet leave perpetrators untouched, as if they cannot be changed. They seek to solely help victims in the moment or right before the moment of the attack, yet instead we need a solution that will stop the very possibility of rape from even happening in the first place. Therefore, we must not assign ultimate responsibility, blame, or guilt to victims, but instead must teach potential perpetrators to have the qualities of having respect for and using self-control around their peers. We must also utilize risk reduction programs that target foundational beliefs of primarily young men, which primarily includes misunderstood and misused gender roles, which justifies their use of domination over women and contributes to rape. And we must face the reality. Those who are and can be victimized are our family, our friends, and our fellow citizens. We must not leave them to fight in fear alone. Thank you.